All right, so are you ready to dive into a world where like charisma and controversy kind of just go hand in hand?
I think so.
Today we're looking at Dave Portnoy, the founder of Barstool Sports.
Ah, yeah, the media mogul.
Yeah, and trying to figure out, is he a visionary leader or is he more like a master manipulator?
Yeah.
Is he gifted or is he a grifter?
Yeah, he's definitely a fascinating figure. Someone who has like built this massive media empire, but also, really courted controversy every step of the way.
Yeah, and we've got like a mountain of sources here.
Oh, yeah.
Articles, legal documents, social media posts. We even have like a Taylor Swift letter in here.
Wow.
So we're going to go through all that and try to figure out, like, what are his motivations, what's the impact of his actions been, and ultimately, like, what is his legacy going to be?
I'm interested to see what you've dug up on this guy.
Yeah, like, where does he fall on that spectrum of,
Mm.
visionary entrepreneur to just, like, masterful con artist?
Right, because in a world where attention equals currency, it's really hard to distinguish sometimes, between like genuine innovation and just calculated exploitation.
Totally. So let's rewind all the way back to 2003
Okay.
and picture this, a simple black and white gambling newspaper hitting the streets of Boston.
Oh, wow.
That was Barstool Sports.
Like the humble beginning.
At the whole beginning.
It's amazing to think about how much like the media landscape has transformed since 2003.
Right.
And he's not only kept up, but he's thrived, like really evolved with the times.
He's transitioned from those print copies sold, out on the street to blogs, podcasts, radio shows, even live events.
And a huge part of his success, I think, can be attributed to like his unique brand of humor,
Right.
which is definitely unique.
Yeah, it is very unique.
It's like brash, it's often offensive, and it's definitely attention grabbing. And it really resonated with a huge audience, especially young men.
Right. And he created this larger than life persona, right?
Yeah.
El Presidente.
Yes.
Which I feel like even further blurred the lines between like, is this his genuine personality or is this a performance?
Right. Is this calculated?
Yeah, is good calculate.
Yeah, that raises a really interesting question, Does that persona allow him to just kind of like deflect any criticism? He can just be like, oh, hey, it's just a character, or is it a way to like shield his true intentions?
Ooh, that's a good point.
Ah.
Okay, so let's fast forward now to 2016.
Okay.
When Barstool really starts to take off.
Okay.
They get this major investment from the Chernin Group, which kind of signals like, okay, they've arrived.
Yeah, they're a major player in the media landscape now.
Yeah, they're legit.
Yeah, but even as their success grew, so did the controversy surrounding them.
And there were a lot.
There were.
Like, for example, the Blackout Tour,
Oh, yeah.
these live events that they were putting on,
Right.
and ran into some serious legal troubles with that.
Yeah, they were accused of promoting like excessive drinking, underage drinking, and it led to like, cancellations and lawsuits.
And then there was the whole Call Her Daddy podcast drama,
Oh, yes.
which like really exposed, I think, some of the inner workings of Barstool.
Yeah, for those who don't know, it was this like incredibly popular podcast hosted by Alex Cooper and Sophia Franklin.
Right?
But behind the scenes, there were all these like contract disputes, allegations of Portnoy like interfering with their careers. It was a very messy situation.
Yeah, it was very messy.
And it definitely tarnished Barstool's image and raised questions about Portnoy's leadership and the company's culture.
Totally. And despite all these setbacks, though, it seems like Portnoy has always found a way to bounce back.
He has, and often uses those controversies even to like further his brand.
Right. Remember the whole GameStop short squeeze back in 2021?
Oh yeah, the meme stock frenzy that like captivated the world.
Portnoy was like a key figure in that saga, right?
It was.
Like urging his followers to buy GameStop stock even when the price was going crazy high.
Yeah, and he was like documenting his trades and boasting about his gains, and he ultimately walked away with a significant profit.
But it raises the question, was this like savvy investing or was it just reckless gambling that could have really backfired?
Right, like on the one hand, it showed his ability to capitalize on this like really unique market phenomenon. But on the other hand, it also reinforced this image of him as someone who's like primarily motivated by personal gain,
Right.
which is something that follows him around a lot.
Okay, so then there's the other side of the coin. We have Barstool's philanthropic work,
Yes.
particularly the Barstool Fund.
Yes,
Okay.
which raised millions of dollars for small businesses during the pandemic.
Right. It was undeniably impactful.
Absolutely. It helped so many businesses stay afloat during this like incredibly difficult time.
So was it genuine altruism or was it a calculated PR move to counter all this negative press he was getting.
Right. It's tough to say for sure, but it's worth noting that, Portnoy has a history of charitable giving that goes back even further to like 2012,
Right.
when he donated to a veteran who had lost limbs in Afghanistan.
Right, and he's continued to donate to various causes, even after the Barstool Fund kind of faded from the headlines.
Right. So that suggests there's at least some degree of genuine compassion there.
Right.
But we can't ignore the fact that, philanthropy can also be a very shrewd business move, especially for someone like Portnoy, who's, constantly battling public scrutiny.
Right. Okay, so we can't avoid the elephant in the room any longer.
Right.
Portnoy's history of controversial comments and serious allegations against him.
Right, and this is where things get particularly complicated because, his pattern of behavior really forces us to confront these uncomfortable questions about power and influence and accountability.
Yeah, like over the years, he's made numerous offensive remarks,
Has.
particularly towards women, which have been condemned as, misogynistic and harmful.
Yeah, and he's faced multiple accusations of sexual assault, which he vehemently denies.
Right, he even filed a defamation lawsuit against Insider Inc.
Right, the publication that initially reported on those allegations and that lawsuit was recently dismissed.
Right. It's important to note, though, that the dismissal of a lawsuit doesn't necessarily equal innocence.
Exactly.
It just means that he didn't meet, like, the legal threshold to prove defamation.
Right. But these accusations remain a very significant part of his story.
Yeah.
And we have to consider them very carefully as we, try to assess his character and his motivations.
Absolutely. Okay, so before we jump to any conclusions,
Okay.
I want to bring up an incident that I think perfectly illustrates Portnoy's tendency to just, like, go head-to-head with his critics.
Okay.
You remember the Taylor Swift incident?
Ah, yes. The time Portnoy was accused of being a fake fan after posting a video about a Taylor Swift concert.
Yes.
It seems kind of trivial, but it does reveal a lot about his personality.
He was, like, so determined to prove that he was a real fan that he showed off this handwritten letter
From Taylor Swift's brother.
from Taylor Swift's brother, like, as evidence.
Classic Portnoy, refusing to back down,
Yeah.
turning even the smallest light into this, like, public spectacle.
Right? So does this reveal, like, a genuine desire to just defend himself? Or is it a calculated attempt to just, like, manipulate the narrative?
To control the conversation.
To control the conversation, right? So we've laid out a lot of evidence of this meteoric rise of Barstool.
We have.
The controversies, the philanthropy, the personal attacks. So now the big question remains, is Dave Portnoy a visionary pushing boundaries, or is he a con man hiding behind this carefully crafted persona?
Right. Is he truly gifted or just a grifter? That's what we'll try to delve into next.
It really is a question that's followed him for his entire career.
Yeah. And it's more relevant now than ever, with all this evidence in front of us.
Right.
You mentioned earlier that, people call him a visionary, and there's no denying he's built an empire that, like, really tapped into something in our culture.
He really understands his audience.
Mm-hmm.
He saw a gap in the media landscape, like a space for content that was unfiltered, unapologetically masculine, and often, like, outrageously funny.
And he tapped into this demographic that felt ignored by, like, traditional media and gave them a voice.
Yeah, and he did it with this relentless drive and an entrepreneurial spirit that you just can't ignore.
Absolutely.
I mean, from selling those print copies on the street corner to, like, building this multi-platform media powerhouse.
Yeah.
He's not afraid of hard work.
Nope. He's a hustler, for sure.
And he's not afraid to take risks.
No, he's not.
Even if those risks land him in some hot water.
Right.
I mean, the Blackout Tour is a perfect example.
Yeah.
He pushed boundaries, some might say crossed them, and ultimately faced some legal trouble.
He did.
But those controversies, instead of derailing him, seem to fuel his rise.
Exactly.
It's like he's a master of using that controversy to just generate attention.
Right.
And we know, like, in today's world, attention equals currency.
It does.
It's a fascinating paradox.
It really is.
Like, the more he's criticized, the more his supporters rally around him.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the backlash validates his whole, like, anti-establishment persona.
Right. It almost makes him more credible in the eyes of his fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're just proving his point.
And he knows how to play the media game.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he knows how to get a reaction and how to keep that spotlight on him.
It's like he's always 10 steps ahead.
Yes.
Thinking about how this is going to play out, what people are going to say, and he uses that to his advantage.
Hey, remember the Taylor Swift thing?
Oh, yeah. That's a perfect example.
It perfectly encapsulates his ability to turn the smallest thing into, like, a major media moment.
Right. He's a master of controlling the narrative.
Yeah, but his business acumen is undeniable.
For sure.
But it's his character that I think is really up for debate.
Right.
Can someone who builds a platform on offensive humor and who faces multiple accusations of sexual assault actually be considered a visionary?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And it forces us to confront some really uncomfortable truths about the world we live in.
Like what?
We often celebrate people who achieve success regardless of their methods.
Right. It's like we're more focused on the hustle than the ethics.
Exactly. And that's a slippery slope because it normalizes the idea that the ends justify the means.
Right.
Like if you're successful enough, you can get away with anything.
And that brings us back to the Barstool Fund.
Yeah. Was it a genuine act of philanthropy or a calculated attempt to just rehab his image when he was facing all this criticism?
Right.
I mean, it's impossible to know for sure what his motivation was.
Right.
But the fund was incredibly effective. It provided much needed relief to those businesses, and Portnoy has continued his charitable work since then.
So maybe it was a little bit of both.
I think that's very possible.
A genuine desire to help, but also a savvy understanding of how good PR can be.
Exactly. It highlights the complexity of judging someone's character based solely on their actions.
Yeah, our motives are rarely pure.
Right.
Even good deeds can be tied up with self-interest.
Absolutely. So where does that leave us? Are we any closer to answering this question, grifter or gifted? I think the answer lies somewhere in that gray area. Portnoy embodies both the brilliance of a visionary entrepreneur and the troubling behavior of someone who's willing to exploit and manipulate people to get what he wants.
He really is a walking contradiction.
He is.
Someone who inspires fierce loyalty and profound disgust.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And that's what makes him so fascinating to study. He forces us to confront our own values, our own tolerance for bad behavior, and our own definition of success.
Yeah, it seems like with Dave Portnoy, there's just no easy answer.
Right. No neat little box to put him in.
Nope. And isn't that what makes these deep dives so interesting? We're forced to grapple with the nuance, the contradictions, all the gray areas.
It's not about, reaching a definitive verdict. It's more about sparking a conversation.
Right.
A conversation about the nature of success, the role of media, the responsibilities that come with influence.
Yeah, so what can our listeners take away from all this, from this exploration of Dave Portnoy's world? What lessons can we glean from his successes and his failures and his ability to spark admiration and outrage at the same time?
I think one of the key takeaways is just the importance of critical thinking, especially when it comes to consuming media. We shouldn't just blindly accept anyone as a role model simply because they're successful or entertaining.
We need to look beyond the persona.
Yeah, look beyond the carefully crafted persona, examine their actions, and really consider, the impact of their words and deeds.
And be willing to hold them accountable.
Yes.
Even if it means challenging our own biases.
Absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in the cult of personality, to be seduced by charisma and overlook those red flags.
Right. But we have a responsibility to be discerning.
We do.
To be aware of the potential for manipulation and to support content that aligns with our values.
And we have a responsibility to speak out against harmful behavior, even when it's, disguised as entertainment or cloaked in the language of free speech.
Right, because silence can be interpreted as complicity.
Exactly.
So by calling out bad behavior, by refusing to normalize it, we can create a culture where accountability is the norm, not the exception.
I think that's a really important point.
So at the end of this deep dive, we may not have a definitive answer to that question, grifter or gifted.
Yeah.
But I think we've gained a deeper understanding of the forces at play in Dave Portnoy's world and, honestly, in our own media landscape.
Absolutely. We've explored the blurred lines between vision and manipulation, the allure of charisma, the complex relationship between success and accountability.
And ultimately, it's up to each of us.
It is.
To decide where we draw the line, to determine what we're willing to tolerate and to demand more from those who seek to influence us.
Because in a world that is just saturated with information and opinions, the ability to think critically, to question assumptions, and to hold powerful figures accountable is so important.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's a really powerful message to leave our listeners with.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Dave Portnoy.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time when we unpack another fascinating and controversial figure